Hello everyone, and welcome back to Oak Crit D&D. The last we left off, the party had entered the town of Fallfield to complete their mission, to escort the princess to the skyport, where she could catch a ride on a skyship to the capital. After successfully dropping the princess off at the skyport and taking on a few jobs from the local guardsmaster, Darian Goldhand, a Leonin man with a missing hand replaced with a golden longsword, the party had taken to investigating the various leads they had on this drug syndicate known as the Haize, as well as a series of mysterious murders that have been happening recently in the Deep Shore district of the city. The party, in their effort to pursue information, had decided to stay a night in the Overflow Tavern and Bar that housed the Jewel of the Red Light District. For more information on these different syndicates and murderers, they had an eventful evening at the hands of Sudi in a dream. We pick up now as Sudi is standing in the room of Flawed with the Jewel of the Red Light District in bed beside him, passed out beyond all recognition. He is bleeding heavily from a deep gash across his chest, and Sudi, with the blade of the red veil in her hand, and in the other, a red orb given to her by the Scarlet Maiden when they first spoke. Crushing this orb in her hand, she shunned the tactician and trusted in the maiden. In doing so, the wounds on her friends were healed, and Sudi, in a panic, fled from Flawed's room before re-entering her own. In an attempt to cover her tracks, wash the sins that she had done over the course of her dream from her own, I should say, wash the front of her doorstep. Cleanse her hands of these actions, and at the very least lead a false trail that she was a victim as well. Sliced herself up with this blade of the red veil, and in this attempt to cover her tracks. When morning came, the party awoke, covered in blood, but with no visible wounds to speak of. Concerned, they regrouped to figure out the reason that they had all awoken in these pools of blood. Figuring that they were all right, they spent some time healing Sudi from her wounds that at this point had not fully closed. The rest of them were simply covered in blood. She had actual wounds. Having a simple breakfast, they mused on how this all could have happened and discussed the leads that they thought might pan out in search of the Haize hideout. Flawed suggested that they find the house of the Lawmaster, and with Sudi's trial date looming for the home invasion and mysterious arson of what turned out to be a respected magical advisor to the leadership of the city of Fallfield, Sudi was understandably hesitant to tempt fate by walking into the city leadership's house. Persistent enough, Flawed then, however, convinced the party to go through with it, but as they left their accommodations, they found a terrifying sight in the road. Just outside the tavern, within the Deep Shore's roadways, was a body. A tan-skinned woman with hair dyed a deep black. Her hands were folded as if she was praying, and nestled within them was her own heart, ripped from her chest and pinned in place by a dark dagger. Familiar. Seemingly the same setup that they had found on the road. The corpse, as the party was realizing this time, was oddly similar to Sudi in appearance, even dressed in flowing, colorful red and gold clothes that she commonly wears. Shaken by the occurrence, Sudi took advantage of the opportunity and cast Disguise Self in an effort to fake her own death before walking to the Lawmaster's home with the remainder of the party following, as Flawed ran ahead with disregard for the remainder of the party's wishes. The party followed him to the Lawmaster Simone Williamson's house and entered with the hope of having a more in-depth conversation with the woman. But upon entering, Flawed pushed them out of the office chambers and had a short, semi-private meeting with the Lawmaster as she sent a young courier boy out. Serenity, thinking quickly as this young man brushed past her, cast the unseen servant spell, and in a creative twist on the spell's otherwise base intent utilization, the servant was used instead to record the conversation on paper. Invisible within the room, it was able to do so as easy enough. Flawed, in an effort to gain more information on the Haize, offered to cut with a deal with the lawmaster. He would supply her with more of the drug euphoria, which was not hard to tell that she was most likely on at the time, and in exchange he would help hinder the Haize just enough to keep them from becoming a problem. With the recent rush of odd happenings around this fledgling syndicate's activities, the syndicate was proving to be less manageable and more of a tumor than the city could afford, and so the lawmaster needed someone to help slow them down. Agreeing, she sent Flawed on his way to catch up with the young man for more information. Apparently this young man had just delivered a different shipment of this euphoria drug to her and was on his way back to the Haize hideout. She also gave him more information on where he could find another man, an old man that ran the town apothecary. Rushing from the office, Flawed then ran off further ahead, leaving his party behind with no explanation as they chased after him trying to catch up. Finally, frustrated, they cast hold person on him to keep him from fully abandoning them, interrogating him and putting him on a temporary leash as well for good measure. Continuing on to the apothecary, as they had now lost the young courier boy, Flawed and Lemba took the lead. Lemba, successfully charming the man, convinced him to guide them to the Haize Syndicate's secret hideout. This old man then almost jovially walked them down the road to the Dancing Dryad Inn, where the party had stayed on their first night. He then spoke to the barman, who guided them into a hidden chamber of the Ritz cellar and the bar beneath the Dancing Dryad, where they were found this deep underground bar area, almost kind of a black market speakeasy, hole in the wall kind of a establishment where they were seated at a table off in the corner to wait until their guide was able to secure them a meeting with the head of the Haize. Shortly after this man was led into a back room, the Tiger Stripe man from the Balding Stone Inn entered from the same hidden door in the back corner. Recognizing Lemba, he strode up to their table and with a sinister smile sat with them for a moment before inviting them to join for a meeting with the head of the Haize. Recognizing that there was a great deal of eyes on them and that they were outnumbered by a great deal of so-called drunkards at the various tables, the party agreed. Following the Tiger Man into a secret door, they found themselves walking through a long, dark hallway of stone, lined with odd jail cell-style cages, with numerous dirty and suffering people within, some human, but most Leonin, like the guardmaster Darian Goldhand. The party could feel a sense of dread creeping over them, as they were not sure what was happening next. Continuing on, they were brought to a massive chamber that served as a throne room for the ruling class of the Haize. A woman and a man, in addition to the Tiger Man, then sat in the three head chairs at the head of the room. As the party was forced to kneel before them, they smiled in the dimly lit room and asked them one simple question, or at least the woman that appeared to be the leader of the Haize then asked the party what their purpose was there. What could they do to prove themselves useful to the syndicate? The gravity of the situation did not seem to weigh on the party too much, as they began to bicker. Flawed arguing with the party in an effort to become the mouthpiece of the group, as the party struggled to be heard themselves. In this discordance, Lemba revealed herself to be a member of the Infinite Blade Syndicate, a larger syndicate of criminals and assassins that the Haize seemed not to trust. Since the party could do little to assuage their concerns with the Haize leadership, the woman determined to hand them off to the Tiger Man, whose name was apparently Krieg. He then turned to the guards who bound the party with a smile and had them all walked back out into another chamber, opening a door in the corner that appears to be a closet. A hole in the bottom sent stinking clouds up into their eyes, making them water and burn. And then, sprinkling an odd powder into the hole in the closet, he cut each of their bindings and pushed them down the hole into the stinking mess of the sewer's waste chamber. Finding themselves in a pile in the stinking, soft, covered chamber of this Haize's dumping space, they became aware of a large presence within, as 3 large elephant-like limbs pulled themselves free from the muck, and tentacles writhed across the filth, and a great maw opened, filled with sharp teeth and rotting pieces of flesh. A drug-addled Otyugh pulled its way from the filth around itself, driven mad from the heavy influence of failed batches of drugs that had been dumped into its home. The Syndicate had produced an odd version of an already odd creature. This drug-addled Otyugh attacked the party, its corrupting bite and tentacles dealing large amounts of damage and threatening to turn the party into what appeared to be that same golden effect that they had seen before. But, thinking quickly, Serenity discovered a grate that was once pried open led to the surface. Escaping, the party were rushing up through this grate as they heard and saw the body of their old man guide, throat slit, pushed in behind them before they killed the Otyugh and escaped out this, what appeared to be a vent tube. Struggling their way up through this still dirty section of the sewer, they found themselves splashing down into the moat around the Deep Shore District that it serves as an overflow, as the Deep Shore District is below sea level for the Wellick Sea. As they struggled against their wounds, they were fished out of the moat by a pair of good Samaritan fishermen, and, exhausted, they found a night of recovery in the hospital. Within the hospital, Flawed and Sudi, beside each other in their respective hospital beds, were visited by a hooded figure. First going to Flawed, a young man's voice gently rang out as he touched the chest of Flawed, drifting in and out of consciousness. "Thank you," the man said in a hissing whisper, before cutting a lock of hair and tying it to his belt before turning to Sudi. "And thank you for pushing me this far," he said as Sudi felt a dagger sink into her hand, slicing her palm as the young man drew this dark, bloody dagger across his tongue, pausing to savor the taste with a smile before turning from her and disappearing off into the night. Thank you all for tuning into this episode of our Ravian campaign. Stay tuned for more episodes, and if you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for updates for when we post our next video. Never forget that it doesn't take much to make a difference out there in the world, so be the difference that you want to see. Until we meet again, next time, for Session 8 of the Ravian campaign, thank you again, and I will see you next time.